Hello, I am Rachel McLean, Community Relations Liaison with the Mather, a forward-thinking life plan community being developed in Tysons for those 62 and better. Our community is projected to open in 2023, and we are currently taking reservations. At the Mather, we recognize that art infuses our lives with vibrancy and meaning, and we are so honored to be able to support the McLean Project for the Arts Meet the Artist series. Enjoy the conversation.
Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Lori Carbonneau, Executive Director of McLean Project for the Arts. I'm honored on behalf of our board, my colleagues, and all the MPA community to welcome you to virtual MPAartfest 2020. One of the opportunities that this virtual format is giving us is the chance to get to know our artists in depth. Today, we thank Renee Sandell, artist, art educator, entrepreneur, and a wonderful contributing member of our MPA Board Education Committee is spending time with 3 of our ArtFest artists. Today, you'll get to know Alex Tolstoy, Ron Colbroth, and Bruce McKaig. It's a treat to have time with these artists. If you're like me and have been to MPAartfest before, and by the end of the day in the tents, you're disappointed you didn't get the chance to know all your artists, well, please spend time with us today. Come back tonight and for the next 2 weeks when you'll have a chance to get to know all of our artists. Thanks so much for being with us. I hope you enjoy this coming interview.
Hello, welcome to MPAartfest Art Talks. I'm Renee Sandell, and I am an artist and art educator. I'm a member of the MPA Education Committee, and I currently teach Visual Fitness for All, which helps people understand art and create art. Great. I'm thrilled to welcome you and introduce 3 fantastic artists who are exhibiting at MPAartfest. To those of you new to MPAartfest, now in its 14th year and first year as a virtual festival, MPAartfest brings art and community together, offering events, music, artwork, and much more. This year, we are thrilled to be exhibiting 52 artists who were curated and juried. I encourage you, if you haven't already, please head over to their studios in the artist sections of the website and browse their works. I'm excited to introduce you to the 3 artists, Alex Tolstoy, Ron Colbroth, and Bruce McKaig. So to start us off, let's welcome our first artist, Alex Tolstoy. I'm so excited to meet you. And you live in McLean?
I do, quite conveniently located next to MPA.
Wonderful. And so really, this is a way to give a live introduction, a semi-live introduction to who you are and your ideas and your work. Can you tell us a little bit about your watercolorist, right?
Right.
I did read on your website, a watercolorist who went astray. So I'm totally intrigued. But would you tell us about your background, your home school life, formative experiences like education?
Okay, all right. Well, I did start out painting when I was a child, which I guess we all do, really. But then I hit about 9, and school took up a lot of time. I ended up being a research scientist, working in, my degrees are all in math, and I worked in underwater acoustics up until 2012. when I basically retired.
Huh.
I started taking art again. I was taking it up in 2007.
Uh-huh.
I had promised myself when I turned 60 that I would try it again. And my husband was wonderful. He bought a painting kit for me that had oils and acrylics and watercolor. And it was not as easy as I remembered. I guess as a child, things were a lot easier. But I did, as I say, I used to do science. And this is quite a different exploration. But at the same time, people think science and art are not related, but they actually are, because you're basically seeing aspects of the world that no one has imagined before. You'll solve puzzles that people haven't seen before, and it can be a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. Great. So where do you draw your inspiration? Is it partly science?
Well, not really, no. Inspiration is a peculiar business. I don't really know where that comes from. What I would say in general is that there are times when I'll look at a line or a collection of colors in a magazine, maybe in an ad, something on TV, and I'll think, oh, that is so interesting. I'll have to try and put that together or use that in a piece. Mm-hmm. So you can think of that as inspiration, but you don't really know where it comes from. And certainly not from science. I haven't looked back on my science career to do a whole lot of art with it.
Okay, all right. Well, can you describe your work? And people will get to see it, but just, the style, the vision. I took a look on your website. It was really, really intriguing.
Thank you. Thank you. I would say to describe it, as you mentioned, it is watercolor. And it's basically an impressionistic approach where I'm not a highly realistic painter. I want the viewer to sort of wander around in a picture and interpret their own vision of what's going on. If you see a tree, for example, there's a treeness to it, but I don't really want to fill in all the details. Just let the person think of what they regard as a tree. And what do they see? Do they see a tree? Maybe they see something else. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of pictures can be wonderful, highly realistic. There are people who draw beautiful glass pictures, for example, that's very realistic. And sometimes I wish I could do that. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I think that approach limits you to what you actually got in front of you. So I can use the excuse that I actually prefer to just let the imagination take care of things.
Uh-huh. Well, I read you talked about the element of chance and or undefined and, the unexpected. Reminds me of a watercolor textbook called Watercolors Bold and Free. You probably know it. Yeah. So
lovely.
Very experimental, and that's why I thought the science connection was in that vein. How, your current work, how has COVID-19 had an effect on your practice?
Well, not a lot, really. I certainly don't think about it in connection with art. I would say it has affected the ability to hang pictures, to have increased visibility, to go to galleries and so on. That's limited because of all this. But otherwise, in terms of creating work, it hasn't really affected me.
Okay. And so do you work mostly in a studio? Do you work on plein air?
Not plein air. I'm too lazy. I haven't got the energy to carry all that equipment. Yeah, paper, paints, brushes, a chair because I paint sitting down. Okay. No, I work in a studio, which is actually downstairs in the bowels of the house. And very often it's all artificial light, and very often I'll have to bring a painting up and look at it in the light and go, oh, that looks like, how interesting.
Okay, all right. So, and let's see, is there any motto or vision that guides your life as an artist? Because you've made this switch, and
motto or vision? Yes, let me see. What did I write down? Something here. Motto. Well, the only thing I could say, it would be a couple of things. Don't give up.
Mm-hmm.
And rejection is rarely personal. I think a lot of times artists are very leery about putting into competitions or submitting to galleries where they might be juried because they don't want to be rejected. But the truth of the matter is everybody has different taste. Someone will hate what you do, someone will love what you do, and you just have to keep doing it. So if I had a motto, I think it would be something along the lines of persist. You know, keep going, keep trying, and it's not personal.
Well, you just answered my last question, which was, what advice do you have for younger artists? And certainly persist and not taking rejection personally are great.
Right.
Is there anything else you'd like to share? Any memorable achievements or experiences that come to mind?
Well, I would say the important thing about art, doing art, creating art, would be to enjoy yourself. Don't try and paint or sculpt or do something for an audience to try and sell something. You can never predict what people will want. Just do what you enjoy and what you like, because it's really for your benefit, the whole business of creation. So advice to younger artists would be experiment, enjoy yourself, have a laugh, and in fact, take a class. I would say that the reason I got so addicted to watercolors was because I had a great instructor with Barbara Janis-Kewitz, who's one of your artists at MPA, at the ArtFest this year. And it makes all the difference in the world if you have someone you're sort of sympathetic with, if you like what they do, if they treat you, they don't condescend to you, take a class. You're never too old to learn.
That is great advice. We don't have it all within us, but a wonderful teacher can be tremendous inspiration. Thank you so much, Alex. This was great. And
thank you, Renee.
I'm so glad to meet you. I'm glad you're in MPA ArtFest, and I hope all the people who are viewing this will check your studio page on the MPA ArtFest site, and we're very grateful for your participation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all the work, putting it together and so on, and I look forward to seeing all the wonderful art.
Yes, me too. So, Ron, I'm delighted to meet you, and delighted that you are an MPA ArtFest artist, and took a look at your website, and I was just absolutely intrigued. You're a photographer and a world traveler, and you said that each assignment is an adventure. Can you tell me about that?
You just assignments in general. Yeah, I've been sort of lucky. I mean, I somehow I just got introduced to people, like somebody at National Geographic who became my friend, but he told me, and I ended up with the National Geographic Traveler magazine. And the first assignment I did for them, it was my proposal to go to Wales and do this story called The Great Little Trains of Wales. There are these narrow gauge railways in Wales. So I went there and traveled around for 3 weeks photographing these trains, and it was great fun. And then I met through basically the same friend. There was a friend who needed he knew a Japanese person. He was a ad man, but he had his own editorial office, and he needed a photographer. So I sent him some stuff, and again, I started working with him, and we got along great, and we've been friends for 30 plus years, and traveled all over for him, and he would recommend me to do other things. And so he got to travel to Paris one time to do the lighting of Paris and interview the lighting designers. It was great fun, So
great. Well, Can you tell me a little bit about your background, your home life, school life, formative experiences that prepared you?
I don't know if anything. I think when I was younger, my father wanted me to be an engineer, but I always loved art and various things like that. And so I never made it as an engineer. But I grew up in New Hampshire, and at one point I went into the Navy. I became a Russian linguist there, and so after that, I came down. I met Alex here, and she, with her last name Tolstoy, I didn't know it at the time. She asked me to speak Russian, and I wouldn't because I didn't know. I figured she was trying to trick me. She said, no, I just wanted to hear your accent. But anyway, I was down here for a while, and I was just doing some photography, and I was encouraged by her cousin, who was a wildlife photographer who had done stuff for Life and Audubon, and it impressed me. And so I got a degree in biology, thinking I was going to be a wildlife photographer. And never happened because I didn't realize I didn't want to sit in blinds all my life. And so I just became a photographer, and that's just how it started. It started slowly, like everything else. And
can you tell us a little bit about any influence other than the great visual world and the people you've met? Like where do you especially draw inspiration?
Almost from anything. When I see something, I don't know if you can you see anything in my background? There's a photograph here. Let me just show you.
I can. Yes.
Okay. This photograph, those are chive flowers. We were in an Asian market at Eden Center one day, and I saw these flowers, and I thought, these would look good as a still life. So I brought them home and made a still life out of it. But it was just, I'm not sure everybody's going to look at a pile of chive flowers and do that, but that's kind of what I do.
Yeah. Well, I looked at your work, and, the way you do people, places, and food was just really powerful. And I wonder if you might talk a little bit about your, like, for example, your photos of people versus portraits. Are they portraits?
Yeah, they are portraits, but I think it's a field, it's sort of environmental portrait, where it's a portrait of people in their environment. Okay, the fellow with the Japanese fellow is my friend Hiroshi that hired me at the beginning. That was in his house in Tokyo, and the fellow at the plane is an old friend who is a colleague of Alex's when she was a scientist, and he has his own private plane, and we just gone flying. He came back, the light was perfect. He had pushed it back on the hangar. I said, Mike, hey, stand there, I want to take it. And he crossed his foot, and that made it a much better picture. I never asked him to do it. It just happened, So, yeah, I enjoy doing that sort of thing. And it's always amazing how people react to my work, because some people love landscape, some people love people, some people love still life, and I'm always surprised, every time.
Well, it's almost like, the art, it forms for you.
Exactly.
So that's wonderful. That's a wonderful meeting. I noticed, the close-ups, the sense of intimacy around food, and then the black and white photos with a surprise element of color, like a black and white woman on the street with a red scarf, a little bit of red scarf.
Yeah.
With a blue surfboard. Really beautiful.
Thank you.
Touches of, and really makes you think about color versus non-color.
Yeah.
That's a powerful element.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a sort of thing, especially that, it was a long story, but anyway, the Bordeaux blue that I have in there with the blue shutter and the blue bike, those colors were real. That I did not make those colors up. I just brought them out. And, but the photograph was okay. But when I changed it to black and white and brought out the colors, it changed the whole thing completely anyway. Absolutely. And so I didn't know how that would be received because Alice kind of got me involved in putting in at the Art League. She bought a membership for me.
Oh, good.
And so, at first I didn't want to do it. I've been a photographer for a long time. Did I want to get involved? And because assignments were getting fewer and fewer, just because people that I knew hired me were getting older and they weren't working as much. And then younger people come in and they want their own friends and various people they know to work for them. And I thought, okay. And I must admit, I went in and I started doing this and people liked it. So I said, well, I'll keep doing it. Not everybody loves it, but you know, it was nice to see that somebody did. I mean, as far as jurors go and things like that.
Sure. Well, photography, you know, as an art form, really distinguishes itself from the fact that everybody has a camera.
It does, and that can be a problem. That's why.
Feel about that.
Yeah. So you just do the best you can, I think, sometimes.
Well, I think you teach people how to see, actually. So
yeah,
that's what I was noticing.
Yeah. I think what happens is you can give them ideas of what to do, but I think everybody develops their own vision as to what they want to see and what they like. And I don't know, as far as when I first was in the Art League, and then I'd go to a show afterwards and you'd go, why didn't they pick me? I mean, sort of thing. And Alex said, get over it. It is not personal. It's just what they want.
Yeah, Alex said that in her interview. Oh, yeah.
Well, hopefully I won't say too much. It's like she has said, because I know that at times we'd be at some meeting and somebody will see us and we'll come out and they'll hear the same thing from me or her. And it's very bad.
Finishing sentences. Well, let me ask you this. What's your current work and how has the COVID-19 pandemic affected your practice?
Well, mainly I don't go out as much. Okay, so a lot of things I'm doing now are still lifes, and it's easier. I come up with these ideas in the house, and I look around. At one point I was looking around. I found all these old tools. My father had all these old tools, and I found them, and I thought, oh, well, I'll take those, and I'll make a still life out of it. I did that, and then at one point there's going to be, I think, at the Athenaeum in this coming show, I have this thing called Fork and Egg, and basically what it was a homage to Andrei Cortez, who was a great Czech photographer, and he had a photograph called A Fork. And I said, oh, that's kind of interesting. I always loved it. It was always in the back of my mind. So I had this egg, I put it on, and I put the fork on it. And then there's a sort of triangle of white light and just black outside in the shadows. And so, I'm just looking for those. I walk around the house and I go, well, that shadow looks nice. I think I'll do that later on. And I have a friend from the Navy that we were in language school together, and he and I talk weekly on Google Meet, and we come up with an assignment because he loves photography, although he isn't a photographer as a profession. He didn't use it as a profession. And so we give each other assignments. And then the next week we show it to each other and talk about it and stuff like that. So that's kind of what I'm doing these days.
Collaboration.
Yeah. It's kind of fun. Yeah.
Good. So I was going to ask you, well, first of all, did you tell me where did you learn photography?
Basically self-taught. As I said, I got encouragement from Alex's cousin and this fellow from Geographic. And at one point, I think I took a course at the Corcoran, a course in black and white photography, because I had never done any black and white photography. So I took one course there, and that was basically it. Okay. But otherwise, I'm self-taught, You look at a lot of things. You look at magazines. You try in your mind not to copy anything. But the great thing, I think, for photographers is to go and look in great art.
Yes.
And then you get ideas from that.
Sure. Yeah. So you had a lot of experience with museums and galleries?
I have a pretty good. I've had pretty good luck because we've been in the Art League for a while, and now we've been able to get into Gallery 75 because we've had a number of things in shows, and we've been in at MPA and their shows and Athenaeum, the Maryland Federation of Art, and a couple of places I got into a place in San Francisco at one point, and then after I got in, I didn't realize how much it was to cost to send work out there.
Yeah.
And my best, though, is this blank wall gallery in Athens, Greece. I don't have to send anything. You just send a file, they jury you in, and then you send a bigger file for them to make a print, and they make a print. And that's worked out really well for me in the sense that my grandfather was Greek.
Ah.
And I went back years ago to his village and found this family I never knew I had. And I figured a lot of them had moved to Athens. And so I was so happy to get in. And all of a sudden I started getting in a lot. And I said, how long does it take you to get to the gallery? They said an hour. So I said, well, you don't have to keep going. But at the end of the show, you can get the print for free, or I can have it, if you live there, or they'll have it sent to me. I just give all the prints to my family. And as big as Athens is, there's a restaurant near the gallery. And the owners of the gallery and the owners of the restaurant are best friends. And one of my cousins works in that restaurant. And so they just give him the prints. So my family gets all these prints from the gallery that they can put up in various houses and hang. So, I've had some good luck over the time I've been doing this. So
that's quite a global story, but that was pre-COVID.
Yeah, this was. Yeah. Well, I still do. I do have something coming up in the Blank Wall Gallery in October. Okay. I kind of backed off because I only put in a couple times a year there. And in fact, I've actually, because of this and because of my Greek connection now, I've juried a couple shows at this photo festival the gallery has on the island of Crete in August. So, so it's worked out. And but it started pre-COVID, but I'm still doing it.
Okay, it worked. You can't complain. So do you have a motto or a vision that guides your life as an artist?
Not really, but I did find a quote. I got this quote the other day, and I loved it. It was from a Japanese photographer. His name is Nobuyoshi Ariaki. And it says, I knew I was, but my best photo is yet to come. So I want to live a little longer. And that's kind of, I just feel like right now I'm doing better work than I've ever done. I don't know why. I just feel like that. And so I always feel there's something else. And I think that I have too many friends who kind of say, well, I don't need to do anything else. I'm done. That's it. I'm thinking, you got to do something with your life. And so I feel like I kind of still have something to contribute. And as long as I feel that way, I guess that's a good thing, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Hokusai has a thing about old age and drawing, and he wanted to be old man mad about drawing. I have to share that with you. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, he did a lot of his. He did a lot of his stuff later on. Yeah. In life. And
so how about? I'm just going to close with this. This is so fascinating. Do you have any advice for a younger artist, a young artist, or someone who said, I want to, I love your work, I want to do photography? What advice would you give?
I would just say to believe in yourself, because it'll take a little bit of time, and there will be people who will try to put you down, and I had that before, and I've learned that I would go see really well-known photographers. Not everybody was like this, mind you, just a few, and they would say things, and I just didn't believe them, you see. And I tried not to believe it. It would hurt me at the beginning, but I would just say, keep plugging away, and things will happen. And once you get to a certain point, don't let your ego get the better of you, because what happens is there's always somebody out there better than you are.
Right.
So that would be my advice to young.
This is great. Well, it's also part of that adventure theme that you have lived and expressed of every assignment is an adventure, and I think
It is,
awesome.
and you know, and this, I don't know if this sounds weird or not, but I've been lucky in traveling because nobody ever mistakes me for an American. I always get somebody coming up and speaking to me in their language, asking me a question. I feel embarrassed that I don't know the language, but you know, I just been lucky, you know, and I think you treat everybody with respect. Don't think you are better than they are, and I think that's why I work with the Japanese so well, because I don't try to push anybody. I just let them be themselves. And,
Thank you so much, Ron. This was fascinating.
Well, thank you, Renee. I appreciate it, and I look forward to meeting you in person one day.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad that you're in the MFA Art Fest, and you know, I'm hoping people who are watching this will check the studio page, your studio page, on the MPA Art Fest site, and we're just very grateful for your participation.
Well, thank you. I'm very happy to be
in
the show.
Great.
All right.
So I am delighted to introduce our third artist at the MPA Art Fest, Bruce McKaig. And I just want to start because your website is so powerful. I'm just going to read a few sentences just to kind of as an appetizer or teaser. Bruce McKaig has been a visual artist for over 30 years, living in North and South America, Europe, Siberia, and India. Initially using photography, his practice also explores sculpture, time-based performance, and advocacy work on art and socioeconomic issues, which is really something we want to learn about. He has been awarded numerous private and public grants from the City of Paris, Washington, D.C., and Baltimore. And he's been participated in over 45 solo shows and 200 group exhibitions since 1980. So I'm going to just leave that there and just welcome you. We're just delighted that you're participating. And, I understand you're an artist, you're a writer, you're a professor. So I want to let you tell us a little bit more and maybe start with your background, a little about your home, school life, formative experiences.
Thank you. Thank you, Renee. Thank you for having me. I'm excited also to be participating this year. I guess it starts when I was 11 years old and given a camera, and I immediately connected with photography. But that didn't translate. I didn't think of being a photographer, and I didn't study photography. My undergraduate degree is in economics. My graduate degree from Georgetown University is from Nurse School of Foreign Service, concentrating in economics. Okay. So as I evolved into full-time photography, which eventually as an artist started to include, as you mentioned, the performance work, community practices. It's interesting at this point for me that the economics and the art have sort of like that double helix kind of found their way to reconnect. Because whatever medium I'm using or platform I'm exploring, the thematic focus is ethics in labor practices and policies. That started
timely,
and that part worked out also so far. It started specifically when, with certain public art projects, my focus on labor started specifically with certain public art projects where I didn't feel like the artist as a pool of labor were being treated fairly at all. And as I spoke or asked about this, and it was disheartening to discover how common it was. And it sort of opened my eyes to, you can think you're part of the solution when in fact you're feeding the beast. It's not always obvious to you. So it started with that, and still I consider artists a specific demographic that I advocate for. But it's otherwise, I also quickly saw it's systemic dynamics that explain all of this. So it's not only labor across industries, but it's also, you've got to look at education, our judicial system, housing, because they all are inter-responsible for the results that we are facing.
Well put. Yes, I completely agree. I was going to say that, you've done a lot of different, it seems you've done a number of things, with regarding mentoring, and I wonder if you would talk about what you call a view, which I have it written down: advocating, building, and connecting. Could you talk about that?
The ABCs. Yeah, so that also very much evolving from kind of pilot phases, or the stepping stones. You're testing the waters, where I would connect artists and people, and try to push the decision making down the ladder, and have instead of looking at it as I or the team I might set up, we can come at you with art ready for you to discover, even if you're going to make it. Instead, have them have that voice play a larger role in what are we even talking about. And from there, I also became convinced of the power of small, that we don't need stadium size activities, even though that's a matrix we often use to measure success, some more than others. We don't always, so the emphasis with a view from the inside out is on skill sharing, the idea of passing the stick, the idea that you don't need a guardian, and in fact, as quickly as possible, there's no urgency, but as quickly as possible, you would not need a teacher or guidance. Not only could you independently proceed, but in that program, the goal is that the mentees become mentors as phases move forward. And that is very empowering. We work a lot with disenfranchised citizens. So there's something about that community building. And again, starting with small, so it's not so intimidating. Like right now, it's just you and me. Once the public's invited in and they're able to share and enjoy this, that's fantastic. But we build from these very, very small stepping stones.
Great. Yeah. Can you give just one example so we have kind of a picture in our mind of a particular project that you're particularly proud of?
I can. So I live in an artist co-op in East Baltimore, and 2 blocks from here there is a men's housing facility called Earl's Place. And for a phase, we're actually entering a new phase now, got some new funding. But we've already been able to work where we could pair residents at Earl's Place up one-on-one with an artist from the co-op. They would negotiate what they're working on. In one case, it was handmade books. In one case, it was watercolors. I worked with several on things like time-lapse photography. One of my favorite, just heartwarming kind of moments, a young man who didn't feel like he had any background in the arts. Often people start with those words, and then we discover they've been writing poems their whole life. They've sewn every piece of clothing they've ever worn. So this young man, hesitant, not sure about what his contribution or capacity even was working with a very, very, very wise, a very, very, very good communicator who does amazing works. And so the communicator at one point picked up on the fact that this man's body was covered with tattoos. And they started talking about that and discovered that he had designed each tattoo, and it had always been at a moment, a crossroads moment in his life. So from there, they talked about what his life looked like right now, and he came up with his next tattoo.
Wow. Really, the connection of art and life is, and the interconnectedness, but it's wonderful that you had that proximity in East Baltimore, and obviously build an inner city community around art. I hope I'm not skipping too much because I haven't gotten into your own individual work.
Well,
But but I love this built-in collaboration. So can you tell us a little bit? And I think this actually, I think maybe you've answered it, but your current work, maybe your current vision right now or motto that guides you, especially thinking about how COVID-19 has an effect on your practice, and and that includes your teaching too.
yeah, so maybe first a quick word about the teaching. I'm so thankful that though I'm self-taught in the arts, I wouldn't want to imply that doesn't mean many brilliant minds and compassionate hearts have not my whole life been teaching me, right? It's part, in fact, of how the program, with a view or other ways, that I want to revisit our thoughts on how do we measure, how do we define, and how do we measure things, right? So if I don't have a degree, does that really mean I'm self-taught? It means I've taken a lot of initiative, but graced by input and feedback and support by many people. So I've been teaching for a while, and teaching is communication. So last spring, I teach in the art department at Georgetown University. Last spring, when March 14th, we'd been told, I actually have a student in January who's pre-med and an experienced field medic. He told me in January the global pandemic is coming and would hit before the semester ended. It hit March and we have to go online. So my first day to meet my students like we're speaking, thumbnails in Zoom instead of face-to-face in class, I reminded them that on day one I had claimed in the creative endeavors, we can never hit a wall. It's always a challenge. And of course, I had never imagined that we were going to be sharing that thought via thumbnails in Zoom. But I insisted, and I still believe it's true. It's true. It's anxiety and emotions. I'm not saying it's easy. I believe it's true. So I'm privileged to be teaching online again, and my students are brilliant as they navigate their own challenges to freshmen who did not move into the dorm a couple of weeks ago, and they are not meeting their roommates and new friends, but who have been completely engaged with photography. For myself, everything had just become about collaboration when it was impossible to meet. It was all about getting together. It was all about face-to-face. It was all about community. But I started, like I said, when I was just a kid, and actually it was a solo flight for most of my life. I made images into my 20s long before it even occurred to me, show them to somebody. And then there was a whole learning path about what does that mean. So it's in adjusting. What I've been, it's not returning to, it's picking up and moving on from a very material exploration. So with gelatin silver prints, those would be from the series of the works that I have in this exhibit. That involves, that's materially black and white photography, but the way I'm working it, they produce one of a kind, a very multitude of palettes, color results, just diving into and really respecting, discovering the material potential that's there. And an entirely new process that I've also been working on, new for me. It was something they did start exploring even in the 1830s as they're trying to figure out how do you draw with light, how we're going to do this, called chlorophyll prints. And you can actually print a photograph on a leaf. You don't have to sensitize the leaf, you don't have to prep it, it's nature. It's chlorophyll, just like photography and photosynthesis, light, it's all there. Okay? And so those are leaves from out back. That's a connection for me with my space and my home at this co-op. The images I'm using mostly are friends who I've asked to send me a photograph wearing a mask and looking directly into the camera. In some cases, friends I've known since the 70s. It takes days to expose a leaf, so I clamp all that together and I sit out back. I'm in the shade. I'm surrounded by these faces of friends, and there's something tragic about they're wearing masks, but there's something more. It's so much more of a connection than I can otherwise achieve right now. That instead of tragic, I'd say it's a picnic. I have a picnic every day with friends from decades and different countries, and who, even if it weren't a pandemic, we could not all be out there anyway.
Right.
So I'll take it. I'll take it for now.
That's great. Well, you know, you're seeing their eyes, and this eye contact we're having now, when we can, is really profound as a form of connection. So,
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Well, any advice you'd give to younger artists? I think you may have covered it, but maybe kind of to close, just because we're always thinking of the next generation. Obviously, you have created a mentoring program that is so profound, life-changing. But what do you say to the younger artists that you work with?
Thank you for letting me say. I might tear up, so bear with me.
Me too.
I tear up easily, so it's never worth noticing. And I never know if these words sound encouraging or disparaging. But the first thought that comes to my mind, if you want to stick it out, is to wrap your head around the thrill and agony of being a risk taker, and you will use your trash can every day. If I ever am working on something and everything works, that is a signal flag for me that I haven't raised the bar high enough. Okay, and I'm sorry that I'm shaking my hand like all of a sudden I'm the old man telling the youngsters, but I would say it's like research and development. Athletes sometimes have their heads wrapped around it. When you lose a game, you don't quit. You get up, your coach explains what you didn't do very well last time, and you work out again, right? So you just kind of, Thomas Edison put it really well, and I can't remember, but something like, I didn't get the light bulb wrong 9,000 times. It's like those were the stepping stones to getting it right. So I would just encourage you to try and see that medium and longer term potential. And the idea that, of course, once you succeed, the clarity, you wonder, like, why did I jump through all those other hoops? Is to get that clarity. So they were the right hoops. Don't despair. Take a break if you need to. But otherwise, you need to keep your sleeves rolled up and try again.
And have good colleagues too.
And support.
Yeah,
absolutely. Be supportive and stay open to support. Absolutely.
Bruce, thank you so much. I've loved this conversation, and I know that people will be checking out the website, the MPA Artfest website, and we're so glad you're in the Art Fest, and I look forward to learning more. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you, Renee, for your work. I appreciate it.